Welcome to episode 154 of the Loane Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about some standouts from last night's matchup between the Rangers and the Kraken, and it was at MSG. And in this game, we obviously know that the Rangers have been struggling as of late, and they've been struggling throughout the course of the season thus far. A couple games are over 500, but not really as dominant in years past like they usually are, usually top five in recent years in league standings. And so with Seattle, they played a really good game. They ended up, I believe they were up 6-3 later on in the game, and then the Rangers made a comeback, so it was around 6-5, but they ended up scoring the empty netter and winning the game 7-5. And so the Rangers came close to tying it towards the end. It just they weren't able to break through, and Seattle was able to hold on with the empty netter. And so it was a high scoring game, though. Some really skilled players really stood out for Seattle, and starting with Oliver Bjorkstrand, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points, and showcasing that speed off the rush, the speed in transition, the speed with the puck on the stick, and the ability to make small area plays with really good execution. I feel like that's a pristine in terms of what he's able to do and how he's able to execute on a regular basis. And with Bjorkstrand, he's a guy you notice him consistently in terms of, like I said, you notice him with the speed, with the transition ability, but also in terms of his ability to make plays off the rush and score off the rush. I feel like he's one of the more prominent guys when it comes to doing that and doing that on a regular basis. And Bjorkstrand's a guy in the ozone. He's really good at finding east-west plays and finding lateral cross-seam plays and being able to make plays from the slot, get interior, and was thriving in that realm yesterday. Ellie Tolvanen had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. And ever since joining Seattle, he's been a really good fit as more of a top nine guy where he can play up and down those three lines. He can be a checker when needed, but also a scorer when needed. I feel like when you add him into their top six, he always finds a way to score because he's got an electric shot. Ever since he was drafted by Nashville, that's what he's most well known for. And coming out of his draft year in the USHL, he was most well known for his goal scoring and his shot. And that has still been there in his game. It's been harder for him to figure out how to really score on a regular basis. And I feel like with Tolvanen, he's a guy you notice him a little bit sporadically in terms of how he's able to generate shots, how he's able to generate volume, and that type of thing. But at the same time, he's still a consistent offensive guy when necessary. And like I said, in a top six role, he can provide that. I really like Matty Beniers' game as well. I felt like 2 assists. It's more of a classic type of game for him where he was noticeable all over the ice, off the puck, on the puck, playmaking, goal scoring, and not necessarily goal scoring, but more in terms of shot generation, how he's able to generate shots, how he's able to get shots through, how he's able to find lanes, how he's able to use different styles of releases to be able to get shots on net and create shot attempts. And in terms of his playmaking game, he's really skilled at using some degree of deception within his game and also being able to pass around guys and hook passes around guys. And he's really skilled and nifty as a passer, and that's his best attribute in terms of his offensive game. And he's really noticeable. Chandler Stevenson had a really good game. Chandler Stevenson's been an interesting guy where not a prominent offensive scorer, especially as a free agent signing. Yes, he was really good in Vegas, but you could argue to some degree that was a byproduct of some of his teammates. But at the same time, he was still really good in Vegas, still really productive there, and had his best seasons there thus far. And since joining Seattle, he's been fine, but he hasn't been offensively super standout per se. And but he's been good when necessary. I feel like he's more of a complementary top six type winger slash center, so he can play a little bit of both. He can do a little bit of everything, but he's not going to bring that consistent point per game or over a point per game style of offense that you see the elite players bring. He's going to be a good complementary element and good secondary scoring element, but he was really noticeable yesterday in terms of playmaking volume. I've really noticed him and his ability to play with Shane Wright this season when those two are on a line together, I feel like those guys really seem to find each other well. It's really interesting how the dynamic between the two works. And Wright's always in suitable scoring positions. Stevenson always seems to find him in through the narrowest of lanes when he's passing the puck. So he was noticeable. Vince Dunn had a goal in this game. Ever since returning from injury, he's been Seattle's number one. No surprise there. I feel like with Dunn, I love his game. I'm a really big fan of his game because I really enjoy the transition ability, the offensive ability, how he walks the line with pace and purpose. And he reminds me a little bit to some degree of Quinn Hughes, where he can walk the line with power and prowess. He can maneuver in small areas. You're consistently getting a high-end puck handling ability out of him. And Dunn's one of those guys. I really envision him at some point in the future getting to that 80, 90 point realm in the NHL. I feel like he's too good of a defenseman not to get there. And he's consistent offensively. He's been very consistent offensively in his time with Seattle. Just really fun to watch as a two-way D, as a transitional D, and an offensive D. So in all aspects, he thrives, and he's noticeable in all aspects, which is rare to have that type of defenseman who can play a number one role, log a lot of minutes, but also do everything, not just offensively, but defensively as well. So he was really good in this game. And Brandon Montour, another free agent signing for them. I feel like I was kind of surprised at how well he adapted to Seattle to start the season. I honestly thought it would be a little bit of a slower start for Montour in Seattle, but since joining them, he's been a really good top four offensive minded D for them. I feel like he's been really complimentary on the power play. So like when Vince Dunn went down with an injury for a while, he was able to fit that first unit on the power play right away. So you have the luxury of having arguably, and I say this arguably, two number one defenders. I wouldn't necessarily say that Montour was ever going to get that type of role in Florida, but in Seattle, he's been given more of the opportunity to play like a number one. I feel like that was part of the intrigue of him going there was he could play like a number one and also still contribute offense and try to help the team win. So with Montour there, like I said, it's arguable that he's a number one, but in Seattle, it certainly looks like that with how he's played and how offensive he's been and how much versatility he's brought in his role. I feel like he's brought a tremendous amount of versatility for a top 4D. And like I said, when with Vince Dunn out, he played a really key role in surpassing some of that ice time that Dunn would usually play. So he was really good in this game. Riker Evans, of course, I love talking about him. I could talk about him for a long time. I feel like he's just fun to watch in the sense of how he transitions the puck, how he denies entries, how he uses his stick to defend, how he uses his footwork to cut ice in half and defend more on slants. I talked about that before with Devon Tays. I feel like Riker Evans is one of those guys who's really good at defending on angles with a purpose, especially on entry denial situations. And then you look at his offensive ability. It's subtle, but the details are there. The small area playmaking is there. He can make triangular sequences with his passing ability. He's really good at making one touch plays, two touch plays. Like when he's moving the puck, he moves it with pace and purpose, and he's not moving it to an area that is allowing his teammates to get clogged into. Like some guys, some defensemen especially, what they like to do is they like to pass off and delegate the problems to their teammates. So if they're in a tough situation or if someone's closing on them, they like to pass it off to a teammate so that way they don't have to deal with it. But it just in turn creates more problems. I feel like with Evans, what I notice him do, he always seems to problem solve himself. Not always, but most of the time I've seen him problem solve those situations. So he can pass it off and then allow his teammates to be in a better situation and in better space than he was in. So he doesn't really delegate those issues. He actually tries to solve them, which is rare for a rookie defenseman who wasn't drafted super high. Like he was a second round pick a couple years ago. He wasn't drafted super high. He was an overager when he was picked too, and I believe he was picked from Regina in the WHL and played with Bedard there. And so he's picked as an overager. He's a second round pick, but the translatability in his game was always there. I remember watching him a couple years prior to his draft year, and I was really intrigued by him. And I was like, how is this guy not drafted yet? I was kind of intrigued because you could have just taken a flyer on him, say, in sixth or seventh round at the time when he was first year eligible, and then you could just move on, like versus having to spend a second round pick and more value on him as an overager. So I feel like with him in that sense, he's just translated really well to every level of hockey he's played at, whether it be WHL, AHL to NHL. His transition to pro hockey has been really fast and it's been really fun to watch, I feel like. And even in his time in Coachella Valley, he was really good down there and was really consistent for them down there. And now it's translated to Seattle with so much ease. He's just a fun player to watch. Like I said, I could talk about him for quite some time. I feel like there's just so many intricacies and details to his game. that are harder to find, and you don't see among too many rookies. He plays with a maturity and a poise and a decision-making element to his game that allows him to play like he's 26, 27, sometimes even upwards of 30 years old. He has that consistency, he has that poise, that maturation process has really eased into his game early on in his NHL career, which is really interesting to see. And he's one of those players when I watch and I envision him being a guy who's going to be a long-term defenseman with Seattle. I just don't see how a guy with this consistency, with this two-way ability, the small area ability with his puck skills can only last a couple of years. I feel like he's going to be a long-term defenseman in the NHL, and his style is so translatable. He, like I said, he's not the most flashy player, but he plays with a consistency element that is very, very, very difficult to find, and very few players have that, especially when they're rookies. So his transition to the league has been really, really exciting to watch. And I'm really excited to see what more is in store for him. On the Rangers side, Adam Fox had a 2 point game. I felt like his outlets were good. His playmaking was good. The decisiveness on his passing was good. And I didn't notice him a ton walking the line in this game. I've noticed him a lot walking the line, but not as much this game per se. I noticed him trying to make plays moving north more in the ozone than lateral when he was trying to handle pucks, which is fine. And he's still able to execute on his passes and make firm passes and good decisions. But it's just often you don't really see him moving pucks only north. You see him incorporating a lot of east-west movement, especially into his ozone play, as with a lot of these higher end offensive defensemen in the league. And DeAndre Miller had a 2 point game. One of the better games from him. He's been having a slower start to the season. It's been a little bit of ups and downs for him. And in this game, he scored. He had an assist as well, 2 points and 4 shots total. And with Miller, what I noticed most from him is his ability to defend from range and how he can control gaps from range. I feel like he's not super offensive minded per se, but he's got a lot of good prowess and power in his skating to be able to move across the blue line with ease. And then that also helps him defensively. So when he's defending the blue line or when he's trying to close gaps, moving laterally, or trying to use backwards crossovers or backwards pivots to be able to try and close plays down. He's got that range to his footwork that allows him to be able to control space in a larger radius of space relative to other defenders in the league. And Vincent Trocheck had a really good game as well. He had a really nice pass on one of the goals. I believe it was Lafreniere's goal, if I'm not mistaken, and had that really nice crossing pass. Lafreniere was on the weak side of the ice, just one time did it into the back of the net and just had the whole net to work with. So it was a lot of really good work by Trocheck to be able to use deception within his eyes to be able to sell and freeze the goalie and then make the pass across to an open Lafreniere. And speaking of which, Lafreniere also had a good game as well. And I would say he's been good this season. I don't necessarily say that he's been elite. I feel like there's still more to come from him in future seasons. It just might take a little bit more time for him, but if he's able to get there, he's still able to get there. So with him, it's interesting because yes, he's getting a little bit older now. Yes, he's still trying to find a consistent top line role per se, and he still has that standard of living up to as a first overall pick. But with Lafreniere, he's been better and better each and every year with the Rangers. So I'm not necessarily too worried about him anymore. I just feel like there's other players surrounding the team that are still trying to figure some things out and figure out who they truly are. And another player that stood out in this game was Will Cooley. I really liked his game to start the season. I feel like he's one of Peter Laviolette's favorites because he can play a checking role. He can play an offensive role. Like last year, he was playing third, fourth line minutes, so he's more of a checker. This year, it's kind of flipped a little bit where he's playing more as a secondary scorer inside the top six, and he's not relied upon as much as a checker. He's more relied upon for his scoring. He can still do both. He can still check really well, but he's more relied upon for his scoring this year. He's had a really good start to the season and has been one of their more consistent players, ironically, in terms of the Rangers group thus far, and just was really good all around throughout this game. And one more guy I actually really liked was Zach Jones. And Zach Jones, you don't necessarily hear about him too much because he's a younger defenseman who has been around for a little bit more time now, but I liked his puck movement. I liked his ability to defend. I like how he plays on top of the ice. I like his ability to defend with his stick first and how he extends his stick out to be able to defend. And he's really in control of his stick. I feel like his stick work defensively is one of his best attributes, not necessarily his footwork, his stick work, because he's really in control of his stick. So that allows him to really control where he wants players to go, especially in zone defensively and defending the blue line. And he did a noticeable job of that yesterday. He's more reliant on body position than physical play. Like he can be physical in the corners and on the back wall behind the net in D zone, but he can be really reliable trying to get body position on pucks and then try to skate pucks out and try to break pucks out. So he was steady for them throughout this game. He's going to be an interesting one to watch for the Rangers to see if he gets more ice time.